Buckeye Talk video version from cleveland.com. Try the texts.
The biggest thing to happen today, or the biggest thing to happen in a few days, it just seems like every day trumps itself. Oh, no pun intended. In terms of the weirdness that's going on out there. Doug, were you enjoying a vacation slumber when President Trump tweeted today about his conversation with Kevin Warren?
No, I'm not slumbering. I'm trying to get some other work done and just clear my head a little bit for the season. But yeah, I mean, the Trump brought me back. That's why I'm here. So yeah, it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating. I'm very curious how we'll all look back on this someday, because it's hard to get your arms around it as it's happening, because you don't know where it's going to go. But once we're at the final part where the season's played and everything, and then when we look back, I think we're really going to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened.
Just in case anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, Tuesday morning, President Trump tweets that he had a conversation with Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren about the immediate start of the season, or immediately returning to playing football, said that it was a very positive conversation, and ended his tweet saying that they were on the 1 yard line. The Big Ten later put out its own statement confirming that had taken place, that the White House reached out to them. Kevin Warren had a conversation with the president, was non-committal about anything beyond that. And we'll get into some more of the details and some of the more fallout in a second. But I'm curious, Doug, I wanted to ask you, and I think you brought this up in a roundabout way, so I wanted to ask you, like, you've been through other craziness here at Ohio State, Tattoo Gate and the Urban Meyer, Zach Smith situation, other things. Is this playing out in a similar way? I mean, I wake up every day and it feels like you walk into like a new fully formed episode of this thing that's kind of ongoing, and every day just brings forth like all these new layers and all these new avenues that you have to explore. Is this reminiscent of those periods at all?
I think at most is like the realignment era is what it reminds me of the most, because when it was the Jim Tressel, Terrell Pryor stuff, or whether it was Zach Smith and Urban Meyer, that was only about Ohio State. It became a national story, but Ohio State, as much as it couldn't control things, could control things to some degree, because it was their deal, right? They were in charge. Ohio State's not in charge of this. And it feels a little more like, to me, what was happening when you didn't know, is Texas going to be in the Big Ten? Is Texas going to be in the Pac-12? Is the SEC going to grow? Is it going to shrink? And that drove me crazy. And that just felt like every day was something new. Much of it was false. Much of it was wrong from like respected reporters, plus some sort of sideshow kind of people. And then in the end, there was something, and there were some things, but it wasn't quite what maybe you thought it was along the way. Notre Dame didn't join a conference. Texas didn't leave, right? There were Rutgers and Maryland and Nebraska and Texas A&M and Colorado and Utah. There were moving parts, but it didn't implode the way you thought it would at one point. But it was very hard to wrap your head around as it was going on. So that's the thing that it reminds me of the most, except if you would have added into that the president of the United States, like saying West Virginia should be in the Big 12. And it'd be like, what are you talking about? Why is it? So that's the layer that's just like really hard to grasp.
I think we've done a good job of avoiding political talk in general, but especially about this topic. There have been some political rumblings along with this topic over the past few weeks, and we've stayed away from that. Some of it, I think, has more legitimacy than others. But Stephen, when you see this start happening today, my initial reaction to it, more than just like kind of the fascination with the surreal quality of it, but just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, here we go, because now this does add another complication to the conversation. I think it brings the politics of it up to the forefront. You can say that that's either a good thing, because if you're on the side of people who feel like this can help push the Big Ten the way it wants it to go, for others, it's an unfortunate thing, because now it gets mixed up in a presidential campaign that doesn't really have anything necessarily to do with the facts on the ground. So I guess, did you have any of that same reaction of just kind of I rolled my eyes a little bit just about what this is going to unfold into? And we've already seen it today on social media.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some people who love that the president got involved because it's in the favor of having the players still have a season. But I was shocked, obviously, but it just kind of adds another layer to this. Of at the end of the day, the president's made a decision, and if that decision's not going to change, if they're not going to walk that back and change their decision, it doesn't matter who gets involved. It's just words being said on Twitter.
Austin Ward from Letterman Row was, I think, the first person to tweet anything about this, even before the president. And
he scooped Trump. Austin Ward scooped Trump.
It was impressive. And his reporting specifically mentioned this concept that I think other people have now confirmed, that it had to do with the testing. That one of the things that Trump was kind of offering assistance. It wasn't just like, hey, you need to play football. That there was some communication from the White House, between the White House and the Big Ten, about what would it take to help this happen, or something along those lines. And that the testing, making some of these tests that Abbott produced, that the White House bought $150 million of last week, or announced that it would purchase those, making some of those available to the Big Ten was a big part of the conversation. And it leads into a text, and we can just kind of talk a little bit more about this. But is Trump's intervening the first thing that has happened that could actually sway the presidents, or would it be the combination of the multiple types of backlash plus Trump's intervention? I have to think that Warren has been somewhat affected by the backlash. What human being wouldn't? And I guess to me, this whole thing really does kind of center on, is this a political ploy? Is this a tweet meant to put pressure on the Big Ten, or push them in one direction? Or is it actually the White House saying, here's how we can help you play football? Those are two very different things to me. One's a potential solution, and one is just another potential complication, I think, that maybe doesn't have an impact here.
I don't think pressure is changing the minds of the presidents of the Big Ten, whether it comes from parents or coaches or the president of the United States. I think testing advances, access to the testing advances, I think that could change their mind. So if this is the White House saying, listen, we have some of this stuff, this is a new development. I mean, the saliva-based testing that can turn around much quicker, that I think even though the Big Ten and other conferences are planning on testing, they say they're testing 3 times a week. If you can test the morning of a game and have a quick, reliable test that by kickoff, right, that you're not waiting 24 or 48 hours for results. If the White House, if what Donald Trump is saying is they can help facilitate the Big Ten's access to tests like that, that is tangible. That is real world progress. That the Big Ten presidents could say, listen, that is a different place than where we were on August 11th. I think that's real. I think that could be real. Just pressure, just backlash, just PR stuff. I never thought that was going to be enough. And I don't think it matters that the president has added on to that. So we don't know the specifics of it. And then it can, and I was corresponding with the texter about this today, it can lead you down a line of, if the White House has access and spent taxpayer money on a finite number of $5 saliva tests, and they can distribute those throughout the nation however they see fit, is Big Ten football the best use of those tests? So then it's like, well, what discussion are we having? Are we having a Big Ten football discussion, and whether, if the White House would do that and the Big Ten would accept that help, does that make it more feasible for the Big Ten to play football this fall? I would say yes. Should that happen? Is that the best thing for America? Then I feel like we're getting outside the Buckeye talk bubble. And like, I am not particularly interested in having that discussion, because now we're in a political discussion. So I hate it. I hate it. I tweeted it out. I hate it. There is nothing worse in the world than political writers tweeting about sports. Hey, I follow you on Twitter because you're an expert in gerrymandering. But what do you think of the Pittsburgh Pirates bullpen? Please tell me. My God, shut up. Awful. And sports writers who know nothing about politics, opining on politics. Worse, even worse. So this clearly, when the president tweets about it, there is political motivation. And Nathan, if we want to go down there, I mean, like, Joe Biden has made this a political issue. Trump has made it a political issue. I think it's a mistake by both. I understand why they want to get involved. I think it's possible it could blow up in both their faces. If the White House can help the Big Ten do better testing, that to me is maybe real. And the rest of it, I think on both sides, I just think is political bluster. and both sides trying to figure out if football might be a wedge issue in a close election in a part of the country where which way the Midwest goes in this presidential election might determine it. So I hate that. I actually think now we're going to get a bunch of stories from political people, and we've had political people writing about in the shadows of Ohio Stadium, a lone Ohio State fan walks through a parking lot. On a typical, all right, I get it. You're from New York and you came and you found 3 fans in a parking lot and you wrote a political story and you don't even understand like whether it's 3 downs or 4 downs before you have to punt. So you can save your political story in the once the great legend of Archie Griffin walked these, and now cram it up your cram hole. Awful on all sides. And I have less interest in sports writers writing about politics.
Well,
tangible stuff could work.
Right. But here's the tricky thing. When you talk about the tangible thing about the White House potentially offering these tests to the Big Ten to play football, for the full context of writing about that, you have to say, as a reporter, I feel like so far, not only has the White House not made that offer to any other conference, it has not even, so as of tonight, the whole day went by, and I've not seen anybody report that the White House even talked to another conference. So it is very specific that they've talked to the Big Ten and no one else about this. And now somehow just pointing that out, which I think is an important thing to point out in the context of the story, now gets you painted as being a leftist or being against Trump by just pointing that out, I think. And that's what makes that's why we steer clear of the political stuff, because things are so polarized right now that it becomes a very difficult thing to have a real conversation about, I feel like.